90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we're going to discuss the best practice for the successful family business. And my guests are Leo Barnes, a commercial litigator with the firm of Barnes & Barnes in Melville, who will talk about business-related topics, including forming a business and succession planning, and John Agogliata from Marshall & Stevens, and he'll talk about evaluating the business. If you're selling it, if you're buying it, if it has to be evaluated for divorce or some other circumstances. Leo and John, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thanks, Ken. So glad to be here.
Okay. Leo, let's start with you, and I know you're very familiar with this. Someone wants to set up a family business, maybe because of COVID, maybe they're just so inclined, or they're going out on their own, they don't want to commute anymore. In a nutshell, what are some of the things they have to think about, and what are some of the things that you, as a commercial litigator, can help them with?
Sure, Ken. Again, thanks for having us. You know, the first and arguably the most important aspect of any business plan, whether the family business or otherwise, is to make sure that there is corporate protection in place so that the owners do not encounter personal liability for a company's debts and liabilities. And that's a real fundamental issue. Many family businesses encounter difficulties because they lack basic formalities and the structure that's often the hallmark of a non-family business. And this is kind of an organic, understandable, common problem. And it's because of the nature of the family business. Obviously, family members are related to their business partners. And with that, we've found over the years, and we do a lot of family business disputes, that family members tend to relax their diligence and reduce their instinct to protect themselves when they're in business with their families. So the first piece of advice we have is to be proactive. And one key step there is that we make a recommendation to all of our business clients. Come see us once a year. Check in with us the same way you do at your doctor once a year for your annual health exam, or with your CPA to get your taxes done. Come to the office, meet us over Zoom, just give a call, and then we can discuss whether there have been any changes to the global business environment that requires a particular course of action, and what's planned for the future, both short and long term. Because like anything else, the ounce of prevention is really worth the pound of cure.
And along with that, as an attorney involved with litigation, if the corporate structure may suit some businesses, in addition, it's very important to have proper insurance coverage, make sure the proper parties are named, make sure if you're doing business with someone, there's some arrangement for insurance protection, perhaps by them or by you, and you just want a lawyer or someone to make sure you're fully protected going forward. Yeah,
you certainly don't want a situation where there's a melding of the personal and corporate checkbook, right? What we hate seeing is when the business is paying every expense, including the mortgage and the kids' college tuition, out of the corporate checkbook, and it kind of blurs the line between the corporate world and the personal world. That can lead to all types of trouble, not only with the IRS, but if, God forbid, you wind up in court, people are going to say you didn't treat the corporate form correctly, and you're personally exposed. So, yeah, that's a great point, Ken.
And Leo, in terms of being a corporation, there are a couple of choices there that I'm sure you advised your clients about. But just briefly, what is a C corporation versus an S corporation?
Ken, that's actually a great spot for John to jump in, because he's an expert in tax and valuation issues. And although the lawyers can certainly, form and set up, we oftentimes go to someone like John to make sure we're getting the right tax treatment for the right family business.
So go ahead, John. Thank you.
Sure. And there's a number of different structures, obviously, and it's important to look at it from both the legal side and the legal protections each structure gives you, and the valuation and the tax side of it. And the most common are, a C Corp, an S Corp, or LLC, or partnership. And just real quick, it's important to know that C Corps are taxed twice. They're taxed at the corporate level, and they're taxed when dividends are made to their shareholders. S corps are not. They're only, they're really meant for smaller businesses, perfect for a family-run, closely held business, where it's only taxed at the personal level. So it does help reduce the tax burden. Then there's also the choice of an LLC versus an S corp. Those are both pass-through entities, both advantageous from that perspective, but there's upsides and downsides to each. So it's important, and we can certainly go into those from legal, and if there's disputes among owners at an LLC versus a corp. But you just always want to make sure you're talking to both sides, your attorneys and your tax advisors or valuation professionals before you settle on the right structure for you.
And this is why someone who has an ongoing business or is thinking about starting a business has to involve a business attorney and also someone who's sophisticated with the valuation and the accounting end of it.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
And Leo, let's turn over to the what are some other problems once a structure is set? What kind of situations can arise, and what can a business owner do to avoid them?
Sure. Look, once you get through the initial setup that John was alluding to, meeting with your tax advisor and a valuation professional and the attorney to decide upon a structure, it's then certainly a best practice to document the fact that the business will be governed by a certain set of rules and obligations. So this may include drafting, legal documents such as a shareholder agreement or an operating agreement, bylaws and employment agreements, which will govern the operation, in an objectively verifiable manner. One of the biggest problems that arises is when these corporate governance documents either don't exist or, maybe worse, when they're simply not updated. And I know that John's going to touch upon, the great importance of having independent third parties examine the books and the records and the legal documents for a family business on a, regular basis. These are important lessons. And again, because of the nature of the family business, when you're in business with your sibling or your parent or your cousin, there is a tendency to avoid these issues. And really, they are as necessary as any non-family business. And
Leo, as a sideline to this, if there are business ideas, names, logos, inventions, you can help the family or the business partners or the people that are forming a business protect these ideas so that they can value them, license them, and prevent their theft.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, Ken, that sometimes, when those assets, and they are assets, are unprotected, they're susceptible to theft or copying or distribution, such that the owner who developed them may not be able to, garner the protection and the value for them later during the business's existence. So, yeah, that's certainly something we can take a look at and implement a protection plan for them to make sure those assets are protected.
Because otherwise, someone could use them and protect them first, and then you may have been the original person, but you didn't protect them, and you may have real problems.
Yeah, they're out to lunch in that case.
Okay.
Yeah, and just one point on that.
Sure.
I think one thing that I see quite a bit is a family-run business. Sometimes they're so focused on running the business that they don't step back and kind of look at the whole picture of the business from that 15,000-foot level. So, like Leo's saying, meeting with your attorneys and advisors once, twice, whatever it is per year is important because they come in with that independent and non-biased kind of look and can give you a fresh idea on things. And these kinds of ideas come up.
And sometimes that logo, that slogan, that process, that device you invented in the shop may be more valuable if properly protected than the business itself.
For sure.
I'd like to just remind our listeners that we're talking to Leo Barnes from the law firm of Barnes & Barnes in Melville, Long Island, and about best practices for successful family business, starting it, keeping it ongoing, and succession issues or sales issues. And we're also talking with John Agogliata. He's from Marshall & Stevens, and he's covering the business valuation and accounting end. What are some other business problems that may be out there? And what kind of issues do you have to worry about transparency and monitoring, which are important to a family business?
Yeah, it's especially important to the family business, Ken, because what we see often in the family business is there may be a more dominating presence. Maybe dad has run the business for 25, 30 years, and the kids are involved, and they don't really have a hands-on feel for what's going on, and there may be suspicion or suspect as to what's going on behind the scenes. And you can have this conflict, on a personal level and a business level. So we found that transparency and monitoring is really of the utmost importance, especially in a family business. And we've witnessed terrible stories over the years from clients, where the families essentially break up. We call these business breakups business divorces in our business, right? When misconduct surfaces or the trust evaporates. So we found that the most successful family businesses make sure that there are regular meetings concerning substantive issues. So certainly any legal developments, significant financial developments, and significant business developments warrant, notice to all the shareholders so that no one feels out of the loop and no one can later claim that he or she was not timely apprised of these developments. So again, when you meet with a CPA to prepare your year-end tax return, ideally the meeting should be attended by all shareholders, to the extent it's practicable. And those documents should be circulated amongst the shareholders before it's filed, so that everyone's on board and nobody finds out the hard way later on.
And Leo, with those annual meetings, let's say there are new proposals being discussed. Maybe there are issues about zoning or issues about taxes or issues about pollution or land use. What are some things that you would like to know about and discuss with the family at those annual meetings to just prepare them for the future?
Yeah, so certainly, the first step is to, keep meeting minutes, right? And this doesn't have to be a formal, expensive event. Especially with the advent of technology here, you can record the meeting itself with the press of a button on your computer. You can provide an agenda in advance so that the shareholders or the big decision makers know in advance that they're walking into a discussion about X, Y, Z. And there's no surprises. And then we can talk about, what's happened over the last year since I've seen you last. What do you see in the horizon for the next year? When do you want to transition out of the business? Who wants to retire? Who may be getting divorced? All these issues that can be, really have large, sometimes very detrimental ramifications. So those are things I'd want to know in advance of a meeting, circulate the agenda, have the meeting, and then have follow-up periodically so that there are no year-end surprises. It's no different than walking into your tax advisor and finding out, oh, geez, I owe money this year on my tax return because I didn't withhold enough, right? Ideally, if you have a meeting, early in the year, mid-year, you can correct anything that may need to be corrected so that there are no year-end surprises. And
will you also cover proposed legislation, proposed zoning, proposed property tax increases, the little things or moratoriums on building or expansion or a friendlier environment to do those things at those meetings so you can help navigate the business and help them take advantage of it?
Yeah, certainly what we like to do is basically act as the client's, de facto in-house general counsel, right? So, and that's why the meetings, preliminary meetings are so important. We can get a feel for what's on the horizon. Is your real estate market hot? Is there an opportunity to lease additional space in your building or in your warehouse? Are there changes to the legislation or zoning law which may impact the business in the short term or long term? So we're going to act, like I said, as the in-house general counsel and really do a comprehensive analysis of all the issues that may have impacted or may in the future impact the business going forward.
I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
No, and I think a big source, like Leo was alluding to before, but what I see is when you have a family-run business, you have passive owners and active owners, typically, right? So you have people that are involved in the day-to-day. They know what's going on. They know if product is moving. They know if there's a new competitor coming in. They're in it every day. And then you may have passive owners that, are not involved as much. And when there's an asymmetric access to information where some people know everything that's going on and some people don't, that's where I've seen a lot of disputes come up, and I'm sure Leo has as well. So having these meetings kind of opens that up, creates that transparency so everybody gets a feel for what's going on, and then there's no surprises. Surprises lead to disputes.
Does it sometimes turn out to be a good and welfare meeting? Do you sometimes engage in mediation to try to get all the parties on the same page?
Sure. Yeah. If there's a gap in acceptance or a gap in an agreement to move forward in a certain way, we can certainly get the right people in place to discuss what the options are and why a particular course of conduct may be good for the business, but maybe not good for one or two particular shareholders. So yeah, we certainly have some avenues and resources there.
And you want to help your clients avoid a bitter business divorce, because that can be as expensive as a traditional divorce.
Yeah, and sometimes worse, Ken. We found that, and this is the tragic nature of the family business, right? If there is a business dispute, sometimes the family breaks up. That's the truth. So it's no longer a matter of, I'm not going to see my partner who doesn't share my last name. You've got, Christmas and Thanksgiving and holidays to get together, hopefully. And the prospect that all of that is at risk, really ups the ante for the family business.
And people may yes, go ahead, John.
Sorry. I've just also, not only is it expensive and emotionally takes a toll on people, but it can disrupt the business terribly. I've seen where it's really impacted business value, the operations of the business. Now the owner is not as focused on the business. It just has ramifications all down the chain.
And also your customers and your business community may hear about it, and that can have a negative effect on future business and ongoing business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ken, I've got one of these courtroom war stories that kind of you triggered here, my memory. So, in one of the cases I wasn't an attorney for a plaintiff or a defendant, one of the parties to the lawsuit, but I was appointed by a commercial division judge as a receiver, basically to evaluate the viability of a business operation while litigation is going on. And the company was a Long Island-based entity that specialized in HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, for really large-scale commercial projects. And I'm talking about the JetBlue terminal at JFK, Yankee Stadium, part of the World Trade Center. So it wasn't a large company in terms of number of employees. I think it was less than 40, but the revenue was huge, in excess of $100 million a year. And it was a family-owned business owned by 5 siblings, and each sibling had a different role in the company. And the owners did quite well. They were pulling out $1 million a year each. But, greed being what it is, it wasn't enough for one particular sibling. And so what he did was he effectuated a scheme to defraud. And he did this by having subcontractors on these large HVAC jobs create false invoices for change orders that was, allegedly necessary, but really wasn't necessary. And the bad brother would review these things, approve them, and then split this excess money with the subcontractor who submitted it. So this went on for years. And it was really the result of something John was touching on earlier about having objective transparency and having it outside monitoring of the company. And by the time the dispute, and the misconduct surfaced, it had gone on for a decade. And it turns out the brother had defrauded the company of more than $20 million over 10 years. On some level, it's easy to lose track of $2 million a year when you have revenue in excess of $100 million. But it resulted in a massive litigation here in Suffolk County. The FBI was involved, and ultimately, the brother actually tragically committed suicide in the middle of this. So, it is terrible trauma in and out of the office, in and out of the courtroom. And, it's something that really could have been avoided, A, had the brother been honest, but B, had the company had just objective, neutral third parties reviewing doing an audit, reviewing the tax return, reviewing the business practices, such that this situation couldn't have developed in the first place.
John, is there anything you'd like to add on that, preventing business problems?
I think that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I think people sometimes put blinders on when they're involved, with family or close friends or whatever, and they're involved in the business, and they lose that sort of critical thinking of it. And we trust everybody, right? But there should be checks and balances to make sure everything's being done the right way. So I think just sometimes people let their guard down, and that can have bad consequences. So I always say it's easier to get everybody to kind of agree on things and move forward on things, even when problems come up, right? It doesn't mean problems are never going to come up, or disputes among members are going to come up, but it's easier to deal with those as they come versus, like Leo say, a decade down the road and you figure out what's going on. So,
and John, let's turn to you a minute on the valuation issue. And I just want to reintroduce John Agogliata. He's from Marshall & Stevens, and he helps with the business valuation. And you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC. And if you missed any portion of this podcast or you want to tell someone else about it, you can find it at nccradio.org. So in terms of the business valuation, are there different types of valuations? Are there different situations, time when your business is hot and it's very marketable, or it could be a takeover? What are some of the things that go into a valuation, and why can it fluctuate?
Sure. So we do valuations are typically done for privately held businesses for really, I'd say, 5 main reasons. 2 of them are tax related. So if it's a gift tax situation where one of the members maybe wants to gift a portion of it to, their children or sibling or something, there's estate tax purposes where unfortunately one of the owners dies, and then that has to be valued, put on their 706 for their estate filing for tax purposes. Buy out and buy in, one of the members wants to leave, or new members coming in and to buy in. And then there's transaction like you're talking. A lot of times, especially Long Island businesses or small New York businesses, someone comes in and wants to purchase the business, and the family knows, or the members know, they know their business, they may not have an idea what it's worth. So we come in and advise and to be their independent advisor. Then the last one, unfortunately, is with litigation. That's another reason why we see a lot of valuations pop up. And I think your second question, Ken, was it what variables go into a valuation?
Essentially, what could be the difference between fair market valuation versus fair value? Are the things that cause that value to go up or down?
Sure. So, and there's all different definitions of value depending on what's going on. So fair value is typically talked about if it's a dissolution or if it's a shareholder repression situation where there may be a forced buyout. Fair market value is typically discussed in tax purposes. So there's different, and I won't get into the nuances of that, but it's always important to know the standard of value and the definition of values being applied. What makes value go up and down? It's really the cash flow generation power of the business and the risk of that industry and the risk of that cash flow going forward.
Could it also be because they have a footprint on Long Island, they have a way of doing things, they have property, they have a transportation or marketing network or a good supply chain?
Sure, absolutely. That would all go into, it's really expected cash flow in the future. So if you have, or like you were saying before, you have a patented product or a good trademark, well, that's going to increase the amount of income or cash flow that the business is going to generate, and that goes into the value, directly goes into the value of the business.
And Leo, our other guest today is Leo Barnes from the law firm of Barnes & Barnes, involved in commercial litigation and handling these ongoing issues, and their offices are in Melville. Just tell us about the 5 Ds and why they're important and how you guide business owners through them.
Sure, Ken. So that's, one of the keys for consulting with a business attorney like myself and my firm is that you want to plan for the future, what John was talking about. And we found that there are, 5 Ds in terms of succession planning. And it's triggered upon death, divorce, disability, a decision to retire, or a dispute. John was alluding to earlier how, valuation is often a necessary component of a litigation on these topics. And, we like to say, let's have a number 6D and don't wait for one of the 5 Ds to surface, right? There are as many options to plan for succession as there are different types of businesses. Sometimes that will involve a transition to the next generation or a sale to a third party. But the key is to talk about your plans to implement them as early as possible. John alluded to earlier about, you can't wake up one day and decide you want to sell your house. There may need some painting done. There may need some, cosmetic work. But if we can plan for that in an orderly transition, we can work to maximize the value for the business so that we can clean it up and get it in the best position to sell or to transition or to bring in, a buy-in partner. So there's a lot of options out there. The key is to be proactive.
And I think from what you said, a little planning can go a long way in terms of establishing a business, keeping it going, and when the time comes to worry about succession.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Leo, what information do you have on your website, and how can a listener find your website?
Sure. So our website is at www.barnespc.com, BARNESPC.com. And in addition to our, contact information, it's got a lot of resources on there for the family business owner or for the non-family business owner looking to, view best practices, to plan for the future, to maybe remedy something from the past. So it's a great place to start to get a little, lay education for business owners who may need a little bit of guidance.
And John, just tell us your website for Marshall and Stevens.
Sure. It's Marshall with two L's, MARSHALL Stevens, STEVENS.com. And there's a number of resources on there. It goes into the profiles of our group. We're based in Midtown, New York, but we really operate throughout Long Island, New York, in the tri-state area.
And you do work for the principals of a business, you do work for law firms, and you do work for accounting firms as well.
That's correct. Those would probably be our three main sources of where we get our work. Yep.
Okay, I would like to thank our guest, Leo Barnes from the law firm of Barnes & Barnes PC in Melville. And you can always find out more about him and his firm and how he can be of help on his website. And John Agogliata from Marshall & Stevens, and he's covering the business valuation practice of a business owner. If you missed any portion of the program, please remember you can find this podcast or many other shows from Law You Should Know at nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York.